Alright, we're into some of the more optional stuff for our projectile simulator. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some vectors and the ability to turn them on and off if we want to. These vector lines can kind of serve as a visual aid so that if you don't want to mouse over the dot or you just want a quick visual reference for how fast it's moving, they're very useful for that. So we're going to add these. Let's see. Okay, sorry. So we are going to, well, first of all, there's going to be a little bit less explanation of the actual functions that we're using than I've done in the last videos. Just be aware that, again, at the top of our script, we are importing all of the functions that this guy, Steve Paget, made in his Pygame function script. So any function that I call, you can, if you're interested in the coding side, you can look up and you can find inside of this function script that we're utilizing. So he's done a lot of the heavy lifting. So just be aware that's where some of these scripts or some of these functions are coming from. Okay, so the first thing we need to do for vectors is we need to add in a couple of variables that are going to be Boolean variables. And Boolean is just the term for a variable that's either true or false, and that's the only values that it can have. Right? So our clock value can have any number we want to have it set to, but these next two are either going to be true or false, and that's it. And so they're useful for different things. So the first one we're going to make is one called vectors IO. I use the letters IO a lot because it's reference to that on like a power switch on and off. There's often an I and an O, and so that helps me to know that this is like a power toggle, like it's a 1 or 0. So vectors IO, vectors on or off, and we're going to start it at false. We're just going to leave it off to begin with. We're also going to define another one called stop motion vectors, and we're going to set that to false. Okay, so those are the two things that we need, because the stop motion vectors is going to be helpful because we'll see in a little bit. We'll come back to that. We'll see why. Okay, so let's see. We've got that. We're also going to want to define a couple of colors here, because the regular colors are a little bit too bright for my liking for the vector line. So we're going to make some of our own colors. So define colors for vector lines. I'm just adding in a comment there. We're going to call one dark red. We're going to set that equal to 150, 0, 0. And this is just how computers think about color is red, green, and blue. So we're setting the red out of a possible 255. We're setting it to 150, so a little more than halfway up in terms of its intensity. And the other two we're setting at 0. So that's going to be kind of a dark red for us. We're also going to add a dark green, and we're going to set that to 0, 150, 0. So again, RGB there. So the green value we've turned a little bit past halfway up. And we're going to add one called dark yellow, and we're going to set that to 150, 150, 0. And so there we're adding in some red, some green, and when you combine those two colors, you get yellow. Right? So this is how we're going to define those colors. And then we're going to come back to our main loop, and we're going to add in some new code down here. Let's see. Do I already have? No, I don't. Okay, so let's go ahead and add, where do we want this? Right underneath of our move the ball, let's say. So we're going to put a comment in just to, again, let us know what we're doing here. We're going to say draw vectors in manual mode. It's right now everything's in manual mode. We haven't done continuous motion yet, but there's plans in the future to do it. So we're going to tell ourselves that this is how we're going to draw vectors when we're in manual mode. So if vectors IO is equal to true, so if we've turned those vectors on, and stop motion vectors is equal to true, then what do we want to do? Well, we want to draw a line. This is where I'm talking about, I'm pulling that function from that other script there. Draw a line, and it looks like it's not giving me the little syntax, but so like let me know what it's looking for. But it's looking for the X position, the Y position, and like the X position of the start, the Y position of the start, and then the X position and Y position of the the start point of the line and the finish point of the line, right? So I want 2 different x positions, 2 different y positions. So where do I want it to start drawing that line? Well, I want it to start drawing that line at whatever my current ball x position is, right? I want it to start drawing my line at whatever my current ball y position is. I want it to finish drawing this line at whatever, let's see, my ball x position plus, so how long do we want this line to be? Well, we want the line to be whatever the ball.xvel is. And just in practice, I've kind of noticed that that's just a little bit too long for my liking. So we're going to scale everything down by 0.7 just to make the lines a little bit shorter. We're going to do that with everything. So it's going to be the same scale for everything. So everything's going to be a little bit smaller than it should, but to the right proportions so that we're just not overlapping a bunch of stuff. Where do we want the ball y position to be? Well, this is the line that we're going to draw for its horizontal velocity. So the ball y position, really, we want that to be, or the line y position, we want that to just kind of stay there, right? We don't want it to go up or down. We want this to be just the horizontal line. And then what color do I want it to be? Well, I want this one to be dark red. And how wide do you want this line drawn in pixels? We're going to do 2 pixels. So this is, the syntax for this draw line function is x position of the start of the line, y position of the start of the line, x position of the finish point of the line, y position of the finish point of the line, the color of that line, and then the thickness of that line. So let's go ahead. We'll just add the next line. I know I haven't explained a lot yet, but we'll get there in just a moment. So we're going to go ahead and draw a green line as well. That red line is going to be our horizontal velocity vector. The green line, so draw a line, is going to be our vertical one. So we want to start, again, wherever the ball happens to be. We want to start wherever the ball happens to be in the y position as well. This time, since it's the vertical line, we want that x position to stay the same regardless. And now we want to change the length of the line in the y value, the y direction. So we're going to set it to whatever the current y position of the ball is, plus, and again we're going to do ball, in this case yvel, and we're going to scale that times 0.7 just to make it a little bit shorter so it doesn't kind of get in the way of other lines and things on the screen. We're going to make that one dark green, 2 pixels wide as well. And so for right now, that'll do. We're going to add in the combined line in a moment, but first let's go ahead and test these right here. So let's think about whether or not this is ever going to draw things right now. If vectors IO is true and stop motion vectors is true, it's going to draw these things. In our case, we've set both of these to false, right? So that's just not going to work. It's not going to draw anything ever. So the reason we have 2 things here is because one of these things, I want to be able to toggle it from the beginning. I want to say, I just don't want vectors on this time. So that's going to be this one right here. We're going to set this to false, and if we don't want vectors, it doesn't matter what we do with this one right here. As long as this one stays false forever, we're never going to draw vectors, right? This one, on the other hand, is the one that pressing the V and the H keys is going to set to true regardless. So let's come down here and at the very bottom of our H key, we're going to set stop motion vectors equal to true. And again, see, we're just using one equal sign there because we're telling the computer, hey, set this equal to true right now, regardless of what else is going on. Set it to true. Same thing with the V button. We're going to we'll go ahead and copy and paste this. That'll be a little bit less typing for us. We'll copy that line. We'll paste that line. Same thing with the C button. Okay, so now every single time that we hit the H button, the V button, or the C button, it's going to turn our stop motion vectors on. It's going to turn this value to true every single time we press those. The thing is, if we leave that other one to false, where did it go? If we leave this one to false, it doesn't matter that that other one is set to true. This still isn't going to work. So this is going to be our way of turning them on and off. And then this is going to check to see if we have pressed one of those buttons, right? Now the final thing is that we don't want this, we can imagine if we press the V button right now, we had set this to true. Let's go to the top. Let's set this to true. Vectors IO, let's set this to true. Okay, so in this case, when we press the V key, what's going to happen is, well, we've set this one to true already. When we press the V key, this is going to become true, and it's going to draw this. But we're not going to stop drawing it ever, right? Because now these are constantly true, and this while loop is constantly running, and so this is going to draw this line, and then it's going to get through the rest of the while loop. It's going to come back to the top, and it's going to draw it again, and again, and again, and again, and it's just going to keep drawing thousands and thousands of lines, and that's going to look really ugly, and it's really taxing on your computer. So the last thing we're going to do in here is we're going to add one more line, and we're going to say set the stop motion vectors to false. And so you can see what we've done here. Now we have something that if we want to draw vectors, we're just going to, before we do anything else, we'll just go to the top of the script. We'll set this to true. And then every time we hit the H key, it's going to set this thing to true. It's going to run this line, and at the end of it, it's going to turn that back off. And then when we hit the H key again, it's going to set it to true one more time, and then it's going to turn that back off. And then it's going to, and so you can kind of see what we're doing here. So just to make things really clear, if we come back up here and we set the vectors toggle back to false, and we run this, then we shouldn't see anything. Whoop, what did I do wrong? Oh, I'm not checking, right? I don't have my double equal signs in there. Okay. Since I have set the stop motion vectors to false to begin with, we're not going to see any difference at all. Right? I can press the H key and I can press the V key. I didn't reset, so it's just going to run from there, right? And we don't get any vectors. But if we set this to true to begin with, all the way up at the top here, now when I press the H key, both of those will be true for just a moment. It'll draw those lines, and then it'll set that second one to false again. And so you can see now we have some nice little vectors being drawn. We can do the same thing with the vertical lines. Beautiful. Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to tack this on to the end of the last video. This is going to be one big video here because I thought this was going to take a lot longer than it was, and it turned out to be pretty quick. There's one extra step if you want to add in the combined motion vector line, because the issue is if you just add in another draw line and you draw a yellow line that's the Y position and the X position, then if you only have an X velocity, the yellow line gets drawn right over top of your red line, and it's kind of ugly. And same thing, if you only have a vertical velocity and there's no horizontal component, the yellow line gets drawn right over top of your green line. It's just not great. So we're going to add in one extra line here. We only want to draw yellow lines if there's both a horizontal and a vertical component. So we're going to do if ball.xvel is greater than 0 and ball.yvel is greater than 0. So only if both of those things are the case, then we're going to draw a line, and I'm just going to copy this up here, paste it down in here. We're going to draw a line. We do want it to still start at the X position and the Y position, but now we want both of these components to it. So we want both the X component, which we find up here. We're going to paste that right in this area here. And the Y component, and now we want this to be a dark yellow line and with a width of 2. So that's pretty simple. And now if we run this, we can still get those horizontal velocity lines. We can still get the vertical velocity lines, but now if we do a combined motion, we also get a nice yellow line showing us the two of them added together. And the yellow lines give you this nice the parabolic motion of the ball over time. So that's how we've added vectors to our script. And now we can, again, just to make it clear, if you don't want those vectors on, you just come up to the top and you turn them off. And it just never draws them, right? So we just have it back to the way that it was. All right, well done.